to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video. Today I am going to be sharing my wrap up with you. It has definitely been an interesting time. And if you guys are more interested in the wrap up portion of this video, I completely 100% understand. So I will leave a timestamp right here for you to go ahead and skip forward. However, this is the first video that I am filming after everything that has gone down with George Floyd, and I feel like I wouldn't be true to who I am if I didn't speak up a little bit about the situation. And so I'm gonna keep it brief, but I think that every person's voice is powerful, and everybody should be speaking up about this topic. For a Black person as I am saddened by the way that the world works and the racism that is still going on today, and it's definitely something that a lot of the times is brushed under the rug and not talked about, and is made to seem like everything is fine and dandy until something like this happens. And it is just sad. I am praying for his family and his friends and everyone involved in the situation. I think that it is horrible that something like this has to happen before we stand up and take action against these type of things that are going on in today's society. And I stand by the phrase Black Lives Matter. I think it's an important phrase and a movement. However, that being said, this isn't just about Black lives. There are plenty of races out there that are struggling with racism and brutality and stereotypes and violence, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. It's a horrible time for a lot of races, and I think that it is also important to talk about that. And it's important to stand up and be an advocate for change and be a voice for change. And I think that the world is just a sad place, and I feel like everybody should take part in being a part of the change that needs to happen. And so I don't want to talk too much more about it. I am deeply saddened by what is going on, and I am emotionally affected by the way that the world treats people. Race aside, everyone deserves to be treated with the same respect and decency. And that's just not something that Black people and other races are experiencing. And so I will leave some more information in the description box below if you guys want to help in any way. I know that I definitely feel helpless in this situation, and I want to help in any way that I can. So I will leave some resources for you guys down in the description box below if you are interested. And please be kind. I know that speaking out about this puts me in an interesting position, so please, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it. But that being said, I just wanted to make sure that I spoke up about this, because I think that it's important for everyone to be talking about this and being a person that is moving towards change and not standing in the sidelines and waiting for things to happen. So that being said, I'm going to drop that subject, and I'm going to move on to a lighter subject. And we're going to go ahead and go over my reading stats, all the books that I read in the month of May. I can't believe that May is over already. It feels like time is just flying by, and there's so many things happening that it's hard to keep up sometimes. That is just crazy. So anyways, let's go ahead and go over my stats, and then I'll go over the books that I read this month. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through my stats. I have everything written down in my bullet journal, so that's where I'm going to be reading it from. I had about 20 books on my TBR, and I read 15 books this month, so that is pretty dang good. That's definitely a step up from last month. I think last month I read 10 books, so pretty good all in all. So for my star ratings, I had 1 5-star, 6 4 stars, 7 3 stars, 1 2 star, and 0 1 stars. So that's very good. I read a total of 5,165 pages, 58 hours of audiobook listening, and for my genres, I read 1 adult romance, 1 retelling, 3 contemporary romances, 1 smut, 1 contemporary, 2 middle grade, 1 YA fantasy, 1 dystopian, 2 paranormal romances, and 1 literary fiction. And so this month I did participate in the Asian readathon. I read 4 books written by Asian authors, so these will be intermixed throughout my wrap-up, but I will make sure to mention which books were for which. So let's go ahead and get started, and we can jump it off with a Asian readathon book that I decided to read, and that was Love Boat Taipei. I read this for the prompt to read a book written by an Asian author or in the POV of an Asian character that is similar to you. And the similarity that I had is the main character of the book is a female, and so that's my similarity. I ended up giving this book a 3-star. I liked it, but it wasn't overall the best book I've ever read. I didn't care for the female hate that was going on in this book, and the way that one of the characters handled a specific situation in regards to nude pictures. So there was a couple things about this book that I just didn't care for. This has a love triangle square something or other that I didn't mind. I ultimately like love triangles and I don't usually shy away from them. I thought that I knew who she was going to end up with. However, this is one of the only times I've read a love triangle that I didn't really have a care of which man she ended up with. So that's different and new. I think that both of the male characters were written in very well, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the story. I just think that overall it was a little bit too gossipy and juvenile in that sense for me to enjoy it fully. I think that overall, if you're looking for a book that is more focused on this culture and self-identity and finding yourself, I think that it's a very good book for that. It just wasn't my favorite book that I've ever read. The next book that I read was my first and only 5-star of the month, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I loved this book so much. This is about 2 writers who are having severe writer's block. They end up meeting in a small town in basically the middle of nowhere, and they have these 2 beach houses. Then they find out that they actually knew each other in college. This guy, Gus, was basically the main character January's rival in college, and they end up building up this friendship, and they decide to switch genres and write each other's genres with a bet that kind of makes it a little bit more high stakes. And throughout that, they end up creating this wonderful relationship, and it was just a fantastic romance. I think that the way that the author wrote in the romance and the hard-hitting topics that are involved in this book, she did a great job with that. Overall, this book blew me away. I love romance to my core, but this was just a book that involved so much more than just a romance plot point. There was more talk about relationship with parental figures in her life, and death and grief and acceptance and moving on. And I just feel like it was handled so well, and I fell in love with the relationship. I was rooting for the characters till the very, very end, and I wanted them to succeed. And I just felt like this book did a wonderful job at portraying everything I want in a romance. So 5-star, loved it, definitely recommend it for sure. All right, the next book that we are going to talk about is another prompt for the Asian Readathon, and I read Reflection by Elizabeth Lim. This was just to read a book by an Asian author, so this is the one that I decided to pick. I really overall enjoyed this book. I gave it a 3-star. I don't feel like maybe the Twisted Tales series is for everybody. I think that if you really love Disney and you want to get more depth and a different spin on the story, I think that it's a fun thing to read. But if you are not going in like loving Disney series, I don't think this would be for you. This is very heavily based on the movie itself, and then it just takes a big twist with the question, what if Mulan went to the underworld? I think that overall the book was good. It reminded me very much of the adventure sequence that Percy Jackson takes on, where it's like a lot of running into these obstacles every single chapter and then them getting out of it. And I don't mind that. I just think that it reminded me a lot of that, and I've read a lot of Percy Jackson in the last couple of months, and so I was just kind of like meh about it. The pacing in this book was a little bit off for me, but overall I think it was a good story. I'm definitely gonna continue on with the Twisted Tales series. I think that it's a lot of fun just to get a new look at the Disney movies, but I don't think that this series is going to be for everybody. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is a book that I pulled from my out of comfort zone TBR jar, and that is Turtle Under Ice. This was a book that's written in verse about a sister who disappears from her home in the middle of a snowstorm, and I gave this a 3-star. It was okay. I don't think that it was necessarily the best book for me. I have yet to find or read a book that's written in verse that I've absolutely loved, and this just happens to fall into that category of it just wasn't everything that I was looking for. Granted, it was a 3-hour audiobook. It was very short, and I just didn't feel like I had enough time to develop a relationship with the characters, enough to love them and care about their story arc. However, I do think that the inclusion of death of a family member and learning to grieve in your own separate ways was talked about really well. I just had trouble like differentiating between the two POVs that were in the book, and I just didn't care about the characters enough to want to continue on to listening to their story. Like, if this became a bigger book, I don't think I would read it, just because I didn't care enough about the characters in its entirety. So that being said, I gave it a 3-star. It wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't my favorite. Alright, the next book that I read is so random. I was sitting on my couch one night and I got an extreme itch for some smut, and so I decided to pick up this book. It's called Theirs for the Night. I don't remember the author, but of course it'll be on the screen for you guys. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4-star. It was very entertaining. It was very short. It was like 85 pages. It was a quick read. I read it on my Kindle. It was a lot of fun, honestly. I really like the fact that the romance was very consensual, and I felt like the balance between the men, because there's 2 men in this story, and the female counterpart was balanced really well. I really was intrigued by the story, intrigued enough to buy the sequel and continue on with it. I haven't read it just yet, but I am intrigued enough to continue on. I felt like the author did a great job at writing in these smutty scenes and making it super entertaining and fun and hot to read. And again, I just will stress this enough. I really enjoyed the fact that it was super consensual and that the men in the relationship were okay with a woman saying no, and I love that. So yeah, there's not much to say about that book. I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for some good smut, feel free to check it out. Alright, the next book that I read was another book that I pulled out of my regular TBR jar, and that is Me Before You. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4-star. This was a reread for me. I read the book and I've watched the movie, and I enjoyed both of them. This book made me cry. I really enjoyed the story in its entirety. If you don't know what this is about, it is about a young girl who lives with her parents, and she loses her job, and the only job available is to become a caretaker for a quadriplegic. And it was just a wonderful story about their relationship and this man who is really struggling with his newfound life, and after his accident, how to cope with all of that. And it's a very hard-hitting romance, but I think it handled everything really well, and definitely enough to make me tear up and cry. So I would definitely reread it, and if you haven't already read it, I would definitely recommend it. Alright, the next book that I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, was a DNF for me. This was another part of the Asian Readathon. This was the group book, and it was Little Fires Everywhere. I don't have it physically on me because I already gave it to a friend, but this just wasn't for me. I can definitely see why people would love the story. The only reason why I ultimately ended up DNFing this book was just because at this point of my reading, I was midway through the month, and this book was just putting me in a slump. It was making me feel so slumpy, and it wasn't the fact that the writing was bad. I just think the writing style wasn't for me. And I was halfway through the book at this point, and I didn't have any idea of where the story was going and what we're leading up to, and I didn't care enough for the characters to want to continue to read the story. And I just think that the way the story is written and the pacing of the story just didn't jive for me at that time and for my reading tastes. However, I have been watching the TV show and have been really enjoying it. I think that overall, I can definitely see why people loved the book so much and why it was turned into an adaptation. It just wasn't for me, unfortunately. So, and now we have the last book that I read for the Asian Readathon, and it was Frankly in Love by David Yoon. I read this for the prompt to read a book written by an Asian author or having an Asian main character that is different from you. I don't know why I couldn't get that out of my mouth, but and the difference was he's male and Korean and I am not. So I picked this up, and I was going to buy this book before I read it, and I'm really glad that I didn't, because I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I gave it a 3-star. I think that overall I can see the appeal of the book. There was just a lot of things in this particular story that just didn't work for me. I talked about this a lot in my reading vlog, so if you're interested in a more in-depth feelings right after I read the book, go ahead and check that out. But I just felt like, first of all, the pacing of the story was strange. I didn't really care for the fake dating trope in this book, which is usually one of my favorite dating tropes out there, and so I just didn't care for it. I felt like the romance in this book was very insta-love, and I just didn't have that connection. I felt a lot of the times I was reading this, it was like I was reading a 12-year-old's writing and the way that they were talking and the things that they were doing, and then they would go into these really deep philosophical like points about race and life, and I just didn't mesh well. There was something missing, a missing piece of the puzzle in his writing, as well as the excessive use of profanity was just overboard, and I didn't feel like it suited the story well. So overall, I think that the story line and the talk about race and things that need to be changed in that particular culture was talked about very well. It's just that some of the other things just didn't work for me, and that's the reason why I gave it a 3-star. All right, the next book that I finished, I had started this last month, I believe, and that is Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse. I took a long break on this, and I had about 100 pages left, so I sat down one day and decided to finish it. I ended up giving it a 4-star. I overall enjoyed this book and the series, and I'm actually surprised that after taking such a long break that it didn't deter me from giving it as high of a rating as I did. This is the 3rd book in the series, Percy Jackson series. If you guys somehow don't know what that's about, it's about a young boy named Percy Jackson at the age of 12 finds out that, 12 or 14, I forget, finds out that he's a demigod, so he's half human, half god, and he gets swept up in all of the crazy chaos that is this world, and he goes to Camp Half-Blood to learn how to work on his skills and learn to fight against the dangers that come with this life. So overall, the series is very good. However, the series falls into a very similar like path in every single book, and I think sometimes that can get a little monotonous, like constantly going over the same thing. It's just like he took the book and rewrote the first book and just put in different areas and scenery and people. So that can be a little bit strange if you're reading them back to back like I did. However, I enjoy Rick Riordan's writing, and I love the characters, and this has such a nostalgic value for me that really doesn't bother me too much. But it was present enough for me not to give it a 5-star. I'll say that. Overall, the series is great. I will definitely be continuing on with the series. It just, some of those things kind of weigh on my rating of it. All right, the next book was not on my TBR, but I was able to pick up the audiobook of this and read along, and I really enjoyed it. And that was Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. I gave this a 4-star. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that the story itself was very good. I would and wouldn't recommend the audiobook. If you guys have ever read this book, then you know that some of the in the pages, it's like she's writing like in a diary, and some of the lines are like crossed out. And I really enjoyed listening to that in the book. It was very like soothing hearing her say the words, and then you can hear like the pencil scratching it out. And I really liked that aspect of the audiobook. However, the way that the character spoke in this book, she just sounded like she was 5, and that really bothered me. So, I mean, if you're interested in listening to the audiobook, I think it's a good thing to listen and read at the same time. It just was a little bit off-putting, the actual narrator. But I really enjoyed the story. I thought that it was very fast-paced. I really liked the romance in this book. I was definitely thrown for a loop at the end. I think that the series has a lot of potential, and I will definitely continue. I believe this was an original trilogy, and then Tahara Mafi ended up extending it, and I've heard that the extension of this series isn't great, but I will definitely keep an open mind, and I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. All right, the next series that I continued was Catching Fire, the 2nd book in the Hunger Games series, and I really enjoyed this book. I honestly think that it's better than the 1st book. I loved the games in this book. I like the building of the relationships in this book. I adore pretty much every single character except for President Snow, because nobody loves him, and Gale. Whatever, he's fine. But this book just has so much nostalgic value, along with a lot of the books that I read this month. But I feel like Suzanne Collins has like a way of writing such slow books, but they just have so much intrigue and power behind it that it's like you can't help but turn the page and continue. Overall, fantastic book. I'm not going to explain this trilogy, you guys all know, but I really enjoyed it. I'm not overly excited for the prequel in this world because I don't care for President Snow, and I've heard very mixed reviews on the book, but I definitely will be continuing on with my reread of this series. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I gave it a 4-star. Alright, the next book that I'm going to talk about is again another book that is continuing on with my series reread, and that is Eclipse by Stephanie Meyer. This is the lowest rated book that I have given the books in this series so far. I gave it a 3-star. And that is pretty much only because of one specific reason in this book, and I'm going to talk about it. I don't feel like there's many people that haven't read this book that, you know, don't know what's happened or haven't watched the movies, but if you haven't, I'll put up spoilers on the screen if you don't want to hear about it. But something that really irked me in this story was Jacob and his forcing of himself onto Bella, and the way that it was written in this book and talked about as if it was no big deal was just disgusting. And the guilting into kissing somebody and forcing somebody into kissing you and acting like you have done nothing wrong and they loved it and they're just not talking about it is just disgusting, and I hated that in this book. There were so many times like I really wanted to throw it and like vomit in my mouth because I just found it so gross and disgusting. I don't know why I never noticed this in the first read of this book when I read it in middle school, but nasty, just nasty. Like, no, that made me so angry. I'm so glad that when I watched the movie they played it down quite a bit because no, it just didn't fly with me. But other than that, I really enjoyed the story. It's gearing up to my favorite book in the series, which is Breaking Dawn, of course, and so I will definitely continue. It just nasty, okay, nasty. All right, it was a month of series for me, and the next book that I picked up was Betrayed by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. This is the second book in the House of Night series. I gave this a 3-star. These books ultimately are not good. They're trash. They're hot trash, and I understand that, but something keeps me reading, and I think it's because this book really does have a nostalgic value for me. This was the first series that I really binged when I was in middle school. And I think it's because I know so much of what's going to happen that I just continue to read the series. I still have 4 or 5 of the books on my shelves, and I will continue to read them unless something awful happens and I just can't continue. But I know that overall they are bad, but they get me every time. This book actually made me cry. There is something very sad that happens towards the end of this book, and it got me. I teared up, I'm not gonna lie. But would I recommend this? No, absolutely not. Alright, the second to the last book that I read this month was Elevation by Stephen King. This was the last book that I picked out of my Out of Comfort Zone TBR jar, and it was okay. I gave it a 3-star. I was expecting more. It's a very strange story though. It was very weird. It's basically about this guy who has a weird situation going on with his weight. So basically when he steps on the scale, he weighs the same thing every time, no matter what he's wearing, no matter how much he's eating, no matter how much he's exercising. So he can have 20-pound weights in his hand and he can step on the scale and he'll be the exact same weight if he dropped the weights. And I don't know how to explain that other than how to I don't know. It was very confusing. And there's another storyline that kind of interweaves into this, and it's about these 2 women who are married, and in this town they are very hated on and discriminated against, and their 2 paths cross, and it's about their story and their friendship. It was a very quick audiobook. It was about 4 hours, and it was okay. I didn't really have any expectations going in, and I didn't really have any mind-blowing like afterthoughts about it afterwards. So would I recommend it? If you're interested in reading a short Stephen King book, sure, why not? But for overall like enjoyment, meh. And the very last book that I'm going to talk about is kind of cheating because I haven't finished it yet. However, today is the 31st of May, and right after filming this, I'm going to sit down and finish this book, and that is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. And I am giving this a 4-star so far. I am really enjoying this. I have about 50 pages left. I very highly doubt that my feelings about this book are going to change in the next 50 pages. So it is what it is. I already know how this book ends because I've watched the movie, as many of the people out in the world have. This is my first read of the series. I've never read it before, but I know how this ends. I highly doubt that I'm gonna change it from a 4-star. I'm really enjoying the series. I'm not enjoying this book as much as I'm enjoying the first one. However, the story is great. I love the characters. This gives me nostalgic feelings, even though I've never read the book series before. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I haven't actually finished it, but I know that I'm going to, so I decided to include it anyways. Okay, these are all of the physical books that I read this month. This was definitely a better reading month than my previous months, so I'm so happy about that, and I'm very excited for June. Everything going on aside, I am, happy about life and grateful for the situation that I'm in, and so happy that I'm able to share my life and these books with you guys. So I would love to know what you guys were able to read this month. Please let me know down in the comments below what you loved, what you didn't. I would love to have some conversations with you guys. So really quickly, I'm just going to turn these books around for you guys, and I'll be back in just a second. Other than that, that is the end of this video. Please, if you guys are interested in anything that I said in the beginning and learning more and having more resources for information, please go ahead and check out the description box below. That is the end of this video. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're being mindful. I hope you are being open-minded and just loving people as much as you can. And just know that I love you, and I'm here with you, and I stand with you, and I fight for you. So I love you so much. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave, and of course leave any comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!